second take. Always text, never call, or voice text if you're me. Deshaun tweeted this yesterday, quote, "Loyalty is everything, don't you forget it." Whether those are future lyrics or not, it still means something. So, Brandon, why hold on to Deshaun now that he's officially demanded a trade? What's in it for Houston?
It's time to move on, Jenna. I mean, of course they want this guy because he's a top 3, top 4 quarterback. That's why they want him. But I think this is deeper. And I'm going to go to one of our buddies, our colleagues, one of the things that he made epic this last year in the middle of a global pandemic when racial tension was soaring. Acho, Uncomfortable Conversations. All right, so this is going to be Brandon Marshall's segment of Uncomfortable Conversations. I find it interesting. If I put myself in Deshaun Watson's shoes and I'm in this situation, here's what I'm thinking. J.J. Watt, rumblings of J.J. Watt begin to come out towards the end of the year of J.J. Watt potentially wanting out, potentially J.J. Watt asking for a trade or being released. J.J. Watt sat at the table in a seat that seemed to be equal and respected, and he got what he wanted. 2 businessmen sat down and said, look, it's not working out, and I think it's best for us to move on. And then you got Deshaun Watson. He comes in, he sits in a seat, and it doesn't seem to be equal. So I think this is a huge issue. This is an organization that came down when Obama was elected to president, and they said, don't celebrate. This is an organization that's told their guys, don't take a knee, or you will be cut, you will be traded. So there seems to be something here that is bigger than just football. And I know it's an uncomfortable conversation, but if I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm thinking that. And that's why it's time to move on, because it was already uncomfortable. You go back to the season and this awkward signing of Josh McCown. Why are you bringing Josh McCown out of retirement? Why are you bringing Josh McCown, who's sitting at home coaching high school football and doing other things in the community? Because they needed someone that can come in and help bridge the gap between Deshaun Watson and ownership. So what do you think is going to happen if you don't trade this guy or you guys don't work on a resolution where Deshaun's getting out and you're getting something of value? This guy, Josh McCown, was brought in because Deshaun was uncomfortable in the organization and he wouldn't even stick around, Nick. Deshaun will go do his work in other places. And at the quarterback position, you want a guy that can come in and make everybody better. We talk about it around Tom Brady. We talked about it about Big Ben this week. And Deshaun Watson is that guy. But he's not going to be that if you keep him. It's going to get worse, and it's going to be the same situation and the same story that we saw in Houston with James Harden. So I don't like this, and I think it's bigger than just football right now.
So, all right, so there's a lot there. And let me try to respond to all of it. I do think Deshaun is going to get out. I do not think it is going to happen soon, and I do not think it has to happen soon. Mike Meltzer, who does radio nationally and in Houston, had a good tweet thread about this yesterday, and he's absolutely right. April 29th is the date to circle on your calendar, because that's the day of the draft. There are no guarantees that kick in for Deshaun in March 17th when the league year opens. There are no mechanisms that kick in earlier. The Texans have to have this figured out by the draft. And they are not incentivized at all to rush it. Like they need to see how desperate teams will get. If there's a team that thinks they're going to draft a quarterback that's like, oh, we don't love the quarterbacks, they need to see what bidding war materializes. And it's in their interest to see if there is a Russell Wilson trade, what the compensation there is, because Deshaun Watson, by virtue of his age and his contract, is a better asset than Russell Wilson. So that sets the floor for a Deshaun Watson trade. So I do think Deshaun is going to get out. I don't think it has to happen this week. Now, to your other point about JJ, and Brandon, I think you know me well enough to know I have in my entire career leaned in as opposed to leaned away from those uncomfortable conversations. Yep. And if I see a double standard, that's particularly right, a racial double standard, we talk about it openly and honestly. I think the J.J. Watt 100%. Situation, though, is not a really apples to apples comparison in this regard. JJ for $18 million after the injury-riddled 4 of the last 5 years he's had, and for a team that's not going to be contending, does not have massive value to the Texans and does not have hardly any value at that contract on the trade market. Deshaun, so it's easy to say, well, we could get a conditional 6th for JJ, but he's the best 100%. Player in the history of the franchise. We'll let him walk. Deshaun would be the most valuable player traded in the history of the league. And so I understand why you can move quicker. Does that make sense, Brandon? Why you can move quicker with JJ than with Deshaun, because you do have to take into account what the Texans are going to be like once Deshaun is gone.
100%, Nick, and that's why I love working with you, because you see both sides, and you've always been player friendly, but you've always pushed back when you had to, when the player didn't do his job. So I respect you for that. But here's my deal. All right, when I knew I was going to retire, walk away from the game, and then go full-time broadcasting, I thought about, like, what is my personality? What seat do I occupy? And the first thing that came to my mind was, always make sure you give the players perspective, because you're a player. I can't get on this show and talk to you about statistics and the history of the game, because that's what you've done for almost 20 years, almost your whole life. I will never be a Nick Wright. I'm not as good as you. I can't be Kevin Wildes and being able to tell impactful stories in a way that everybody can relate and is entertaining and it's funny. I can't do that. I can't interview people like Jenna Wolf and have 2 Emmys. I can't do it. So my place and my seat that I occupy on this show is the player's perspective. Every day when I walk out this door and I walk into my facility, I got 60 professional athletes out there. I got 22 college athletes training to go to the NFL draft. In April and May, I'm going to have 10 NBA draft eligible guys training here. And we have these conversations. So when I'm sitting up here, it's not just me trying to be cool. I'm actually giving the player's perspective. And it's not just my perspective from 2006 when I was drafted. I'm talking to guys who are in the locker room now. And these are the things that they're saying. And this is what's happening in Houston. Guys are literally thinking like, yeah, Nick, you're right, 100%. It's easy to walk away from J.J. Watt, and not so much Watson. But in that locker room, these guys are feeling uncomfortable. Right. They're uncomfortable. And for that reason,
That's the old Slim Charles line I use from The Wire all the time. Don't matter if it's a lie. If it's a lie, we fight on the lie. And the reason I use it is because what I said about JJ and Deshaun and the difference of values and trajectory and the contract and stuff, I think is all accurate. It also might be meaningless if the majority of players in the locker room see it the way, Brandon, you laid out, which is why your perspective's so important. If they see it as, you got to be kidding me. JJ wants his release, and the next day he's on Twitter figuring out where he's going. Deshaun, they won't even answer the phone. So even if there is a reasoning behind those discrepancies, you do risk, and I think this is your important point, Brandon, you risk alienating not only Deshaun, who's probably not going to be there, but other guys in that locker room who see it the way you do, who see it the way Deshaun does, who you are going to need to have to be there. So I think it's an important point. I just think that from a pragmatic perspective, there is a difference there, but it doesn't mean that from a narrative perspective in the locker room, that difference matters much. I think that's
right. Well, they still seem both sides to be in. Go ahead. Go ahead, Brandon. Finish up.
Yeah, just the last thing, Jenna. I just think that the Texans have a public relations issue. Like, if I'm thinking about the Texans, like Deshaun Watson, he's going to play, what, 10 more years, maybe 15 years if he's lucky, and he adopts the TB12 method. The Texans are going to be here for another 100 years or so, right? So if I'm the Texans, I got to think about, what does my brand look like after Deshaun Watson? And you have some damage control. So you got some issues here, and you got to fix those things right now.
And as of this morning, they are still at an impasse, so I got to wait and see what happens. Take a turn. Talk some Dallas Cowboys now. Why are they sticking with Dak Prescott, even though Russ said he's open to Dallas, even though Dak hasn't been offered a contract in like 18 years, it feels like? To be discussed next. First things first. Good stuff, Brendan.